Randumb Rants. Like and subscribe. Before we start this video, I gotta show love to the people that show love to me, of course, right? So shout outs to Rudolph Pitt, A. Gene Solomon, 1982, Mumbo Sauce, Lobo Tommy, or is it lobotomy? I don't know, right? Lobo Tommy, right? Melissa Ray, Rika Baby IFY. I don't know how to say your name, sweetie. I'm sorry. But shout outs to you. Shout outs to What Would Gates Do? Shout outs to my man T Money XL86. Shout outs to you. You turning 40 this year, I'm assuming, right? Shout outs to you, man. Shout outs to you. If you haven't turned 40 already, happy birthday or happy belated, or you already know. Shout outs to you, bruh. And shout outs to my one man, my cuzzo, my main man, Calvin Richmond. Yeah. Oh, you know this is for you. You know this one's for you, right? You know this one's for you. Calvin Richmond requested this video personally. Okay? Now, of course, I'm doing this for YouTube, right? I want everybody to enjoy this. But Calvin, this is for you personally, buddy. Because, I mean, to think I don't know Lem Harris is crazy. Crazy. Chi-Town? Well, you know what? Since, like, it's funny because Calvin, he requested this on a couple videos. I'm like, I got you, right? I'm rants, right? But understand this, though, right? To know Lem Harris, let's just start from the beginning, right? To know Lem Harris is to know that that's his alias. Everybody know his name is Ronald Dunham. Strike. They called him Strike. Yeah, he's from the Nelson Mandela apartment homes. Projects out Brooklyn. Crooklyn stand up. Let's go. Come on, man. This is the bio episode, man. Ronald Strike Dunham, a.k.a. Lem Harris. Yeah, he's in 2 movies. Y'all didn't even know that. Y'all, I'm teaching y'all something today. Welcome to Randumb Rants. Is this your first time watching me? This is your 15th time watching me. This is what I do. Let me cook. Pass me the ball. I'm going to give you a mean 96, 97 AI. For those who don't know, that's Allen Iverson. Not artificial intelligence. Allen Iverson, I'm giving you a mean crossover. You that way. I'm over here. Oops, now I'm at the lane. Laying it up. All right? I'm sorry, I'm going off. I'm sorry, I apologize, right? But let's officially start from the beginning, though, right? Like, to think that I'm starting off at Soul Food is crazy. You guys remember the movie Clockers, right? Spike Lee joint, right? Yeah. Like I said, Nelson Mandela houses, and we meet Ronald Strike Dunham, a young drug dealer, right? Who's also known as a clocker. That term refers to someone who works a drug corner, you know, like it's a regular job, right? And Strike or Ronald, he has an infatuation with trains, like in lavish model train sets. He has an infatuation with them, right? And we also meet Mr. Andre, right? He's a policeman, right? But he watched Strike come up. You know, he's seen him when he was a little innocent boy and watched him turn into a clocker. And what you don't know is Andre has a son of his own. Also known, his son is named, they call him Shorty in the movie, but his son is named Tyrone. Good young man, you know, he has a father, you know, but Tyrone, although he has a father, you got to understand, hip hop is prevalent on these young, early 80s babies, late 70s babies. Hip hop is prevalent. And naturally, Tyrone doesn't look up to his police father. No. He looks up to Strike, right? And we'll get more into them, you know. But every day, Strike reports to the corner. He takes orders. He watches for police. He collects money. He makes sure business keeps moving, right? Now, Strike, he isn't like a fearless kingpin. No, he's constantly stressed, okay? Understand that Strike smokes cigarettes to calm his nerves. He has stomach ulcers. Yeah, Strike is known to just call Earl, throw up, vomit, blood in the projects, right? And this is like, you know, you got to understand, this is the projects. People in the projects see trauma every day. You know, Strike lives with the pressure of knowing one mistake can get him deleted or sent to prison, right? Then we got, of course, his boss, Rodney Little, right? Respected, feared drug dealer. He runs the Nelson Mandela homes, right? With intimidation, of course. And he has a loyal crew of young men, right? That grew up admiring him, like Strike, right? And we also meet Strike's older brother, Victor, of course, too, right? And unlike Strike, Victor's tried to live an honest life. He has a steady job, a family. You know, he wants nothing to do with the drug trade, of course. And the contrast between the two brothers, of course, becomes one of the biggest themes of this movie, because one chose the streets and the other chose responsibility, right? And then things change overnight, right? When Daryl Adams, who was very annoying, if you saw the movie, you know he's very annoying, right? And he looks like my man Brian Hooks, but that's neither here nor there. But he's another drug dealer or clocker, you can say, right? And he's deleted inside of a fast food restaurant. Well, right outside of it, I should say. Right outside of a fast food restaurant, right? And almost immediately, Victor walks in the police station and he confesses to the 187. You know, he says he popped Daryl and he wants to turn himself in. And most detectives are ready to close the case. But Detective Rocco Klein, he isn't buying it. See, Klein has worked in these neighborhoods for years. Something about Victor's confession just doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, Victor has no criminal history, no obvious motive. He doesn't even fit the profile of someone who would suddenly execute a drug dealer, right? And instead of accepting the confession, Klein starts digging deeper. And this investigation keeps bringing him back to Strike. And the more Klein watches him, the more he believes Strike knows exactly what happened, even if he wasn't the one that actually pulled the trigger, right? And while all this is happening, right, you got Tyrone. He's admiring Strike. You know, Strike's the leader of his crew. And Tyrone even goes and gets a part in his head, just like Strike, right? You know, he wants to be cool, right? And his mother pops out, as if, you know, his father isn't there, but his mother pops out. This would happen all the time in the 90s, right? Pressing out the drug dealers. Who put this part in my son's head? You know, like pressing him out. Like, my son is not going to be a clocker, you know? And she had all right to do that. I respect that. Especially, you know, what happens to Tyrone. But, you know, we gonna get on that, right? And we also see the relationship between Strike and Rodney Little, of course. Rodney sees Strike as someone he can manipulate. He can give him money, responsibilities, and just enough attention to keep him loyal. You know, Rodney understands that controlling young men isn't always about fear. Sometimes it's about making them feel important. And eventually we learn what really happened. Rodney wanted Daryl Adams deleted because Daryl had become a problem, and rather than carrying out himself, Rodney manipulated Strike into setting everything up. Now, Strike wasn't necessarily the one that pulled the trigger, but he played a major role in making it possible, right? And Rodney used him because if anything went wrong, Strike would be the one left dealing with the consequences. Smart man, right? And Victor discovers what really happened and makes an incredible sacrifice. And instead of allowing his younger brother to spend the rest of his life in prison or be deleted by the people in the drug game, Victor falsely confesses to protect him. He chooses to throw away his own freedom because he believed Strike still had a chance to escape the streets. Right? Now, Detective Klein, he continues digging because he realizes, Victor is lying. He begins putting together witness statements, timelines, and inconsistencies that point away from Victor's confession, of course, right? And at the same time, he develops an unusual relationship with Strike. See, he isn't trying to be Strike's friend, but he sees a young man who's been pulled into a life that keeps destroying everyone around him, right? And Rodney, he gets word that Strike has this unusual relationship with the police. And Rodney has an unusual conversation with Strike in the car. You guys remember that scene, right? When he put the tool in his mouth? Yeah, scared Strike. Told him if you tell the police anything, you're done. Nice threat, right? Nice 90s threat. Now, Detective Klein, who's investigating the situation, right, he arrests Rodney and manipulates the situation by making Rodney believe Strike has snitched on him, right? And of course, Rodney orders a hit on Strike while he's in jail. And Strike tries to leave town, but Rodney's enforcer, Errol, I forgot to mention him, Errol, I was scared of this guy watching this as a kid. Errol is a heroin addict who also has HIV. He has nothing to live for. See, he's also a hitman for Rodney too. So realize this. Understand this actually. If you make his list, you won't have much longer to live. Okay? He's a hitman. So yeah, Errol is waiting outside to, delete Strike, right? Strike is unaware that he's looked at as a snitch. And he didn't know, because he didn't do it. He didn't snitch, But Tyrone, remember the young boy? He catches Errol, pops him right in the chest. Broad daylight. Using Strike's tool. Yeah. Yep. One of the most tragic moments of this movie, right? And of course, Tyrone, he's arrested. He's a kid. He admits that, the tool belongs to Strike. And Tyrone's father, Andre, remember him? He blames Strike for corrupting his son and brutally beats Strike in front of the neighborhood. He didn't care about his stomach issues. He didn't care about any of that. He pounded on Strike, spanked Strike, beat him all up and down Nelson Mandela Homes. It looked like a hardcore match. WWF back in the day. Anything goes. Andre pummels him. And he tells him, if I ever see you in this project again, you won't even have to worry about none of your little boys that think you a snitch. You won't have to worry about Rodney, the main man around here. No, I'm going to do it to you. Trust me, I'm going to put you in that ground, buddy. I'm going to do it to you. If I ever catch you around here again, it's over. Strike don't know what to do. He's bleeding. He goes to that whip. Man, he looks behind him. Rodney out of jail, and he trying to see what's up with Strike. So of course Strike heads right to the police station. Now he wants to cooperate, right? He wants to cooperate now. And Strike tells the actual story of what happened. But this also leads to Strike and Victor's mom coming down too. And mind you, this lady looks like she makes amazing deviled eggs. If she has since passed away, I apologize, but Rants knows what he's talking about. This lady makes amazing deviled eggs. Look at her. Just look. Rants knows these things. Like, don't ask me. I just know, right? Anyway, right? She goes to the police station and she gets all spiritual, right? This is a Spike Lee movie. She gets so spiritual, like, oh, it's self-defense because he told me it was. God and Victor and Christ wouldn't lie. You know, typical, right? And it's enough evidence where he gets to go home, right? But, and we told him that's just Victor, okay? Because this isn't about Victor. This is about Strike, right? Strike, he's left in a pickle. Strike he's placed in a pickle, as we like to say, right? He's in a pickle. He's in a jam. Right? Strike can either go back to his projects where he won't to live to see 5, maybe 7 days, you know? In fact, at the end of this movie, another clocker gets popped, you know? And we know that was intended for Strike, but Strike, the police, like I said, Detective Klein, he doesn't arrest Strike. See, Strike is infatuated with trains, right? Strike has never seen anything other than his projects. So, Klein, Detective Klein, he puts Ronald Strike Dunham on a train. He gives him a ticket, sends him to Penn Station, and tells him, if I ever see you in this city again, this is the 3rd time now, it's over. Like, you're getting arrested, you know, or we're going to leave you. We're going to let the wolves feast on you, you know. And the movie ends, we see Strike on a train and he's leaving New York. And he's looking at the different scenery. But where does he go? Where does he go? This is Randumb Rants. This is Randumb Rants. Well, he goes to Chicago. That's where he goes. He goes to Chicago. Understand? He's about to form into Lem, but he's still Ron, right? He's Ron with the bad stomach problems. He has the stomach ulcers, right? And they still give him problems. He's in Chicago. He goes right to the hospital because that's somewhere to stay. He knows he has a medical issue. He can get looked at. And let's just say how God works, right? If you guys don't believe in God, I apologize. You know how your Messiah works, right? I don't know. Rants don't want to offend you, right? But he goes to this hospital. I believe it was University of Chicago Medicine over there in Hyde Park, right? And he meets his nurse, whom takes a liking to him. Yes, Veronica. Yeah, the nurse. Light-skinned baddie, right? And he forms a relationship with Veronica. He's living with her now in Chicago, right? And he's even going to church. He's going to church now, right? Yeah. And, you know, it's funny because Veronica, when she first meets him, you know, she sees his name is Ron and whatnot. But he was like, you know, call me Lem. You know, I grew up eating a lot of lemon heads. That's what my mother called me. That was my nickname, lemon head. Just call me Lem, you know. And that becomes his name in Chicago, right? Just call me Lem. Lem Harris, right? And Veronica, she eventually gets Lem a job in the hospital. He's cleaning up now. His stomach is straight, okay? He can even drink a little bit now. He's all patched up. It's been like, 2 years since the events of Clockers, right? Stomach straight. He's cleaning up in the hospital. He has a job now, right? But what you don't know is, you know, Lem, he's a poon hound. Well, strike, right? Whatever you want to call him. He's a pone hound. And Bird just so happened to be, going to the hospital, taking Big Mama to the hospital, I should say, for her diabetes checkup. Yeah, you guys remember Big Mama had the diabetes and soul food. And they meet. Bird and Lem meet. He introduced himself as Lem Harris. She introduced herself as Bird, right? And it's so funny, right? He begins cheating on Veronica, right? And eventually he breaks up with Veronica and lives with Bird. And they were still on good terms, right? But he's living with Bird now, and it becomes to the point where he proposes to Bird and they get married. And that leads us to the events of Soul Food, right? Now, understand, before we even start this, let me also explain. Aunt Terry paid for this wedding, okay? We get it, she's a witch, but she's the financial backbone of the family. Without her, a lot in this movie doesn't even happen, right? So now we're at the wedding reception, and we see Bird and we see Lem, right? But wait, we're introduced to Samuel. Yeah, is that his name, Samuel? Funny name, right? A suave, light-skinned brother, right? That just so happened to be Bird's ex. And of course, this throws Bird off. But trust, that's not the only ex at this wedding, right? Because Lem invited his ex, Veronica, to the wedding. See, remember, they ended on good terms. But Veronica, she's going to try to ruin Lem's marriage, right? You guys remember the movie. The whole family noticed Lem dancing on his big booty ex. You remember he was drinking champagne like he was Tupac? And Big Mama tells Ahmad, hey, go tell Bird to come out here and get her husband. And Ahmad, who is never in a child's place, right, throughout this whole movie, he walks in a woman's bathroom and says, hey, Big Mama told Bird to get her ass out here and go get her husband. And Maxine and Terry, they telling Bird, hey, your husband's out there bumping and grinding with a hoochie mama. And Bird actually witnessed this. She walks out there and witnesses it and does nothing. She runs back into the bathroom and asks her sisters, who is that hoochie mama dancing on my man? As if they know. They don't know her. They don't know her. They're your sisters, right? And then she says, this is my wedding day. I'm supposed to be happy. And then the sisters plot to beat on Veronica, right? But when they get out there, we see Lem dancing with Big Mama. And Bird forgets. Or does she? See. This is a movie and I'm rants. But trust, they purposely left this part out, right? Because it doesn't have much to do with classic slave dishes such as, barbecue pork ribs or chitlins, But yeah, this is a fact. Bird and her sisters was about to beat on Veronica, right? And this leads to Veronica getting the last laugh. But we're going to get there. We'll get there, right? So now we're at dinner. And understand, Lem and Bird just had freaky time in the bathroom. And he asks Bird, what does it mean when your mother has a fish dream? And Bird says, oh, it means someone is pregnant or about to be pregnant. Yeah, our family is very superstitious. You should have known that, because, we're already married, right? And Lem, he thinks it's an appropriate time to say, well, I got one. If you step on a crack, you break your mama's back. As if Big Mama isn't there with a limp leg and sugary blood, and the family goes silent. But understand, Lem is a teenager. And I know you're like, Rants, Strike is clearly a grown-ass man. No. See, Lem is a teenager because he has sex and doesn't pay bills. Yeah, right? And Ahmad's father, Kenny, he asks Lem, hey, what was you in the joint for? And this creates another awkward moment during dinner. But Lem is secure, right? It's not like these people know his real name, and they're going to case search him, Not to mention, this is the late 90s, right? Nobody would even do anything like that except for Aunt Terry, of course, right? And you also really got to understand, like, Aunt Terry already doesn't think Lem is a man because he didn't put a dime on the wedding. Terry don't care that he spent his whole hospital check on the engagement ring. She don't care about that. She honestly feels like he can't even really be trusted. But getting back on Lem, right? He's secure. He says, look, I ain't even gonna lie to y'all. I made a mistake. I came here from New York to help my cousin out. And I guess I just got caught. And Kenny, he boldly asks, what, got caught doing what? And Lem says, nah, it's alright. I got caught selling a little something. And Bird cuts him off and takes up for her man and says, yeah, he paid his debt to society. Ain't no different from daddy and his gambling. Which doesn't affect Ahmad's father at all. That's not his father, that's his wife's father. But nonetheless, the question had to be answered, right? And now we see Bird in the hair salon being a young entrepreneur. And we see Ahmad. He has a job working, taking out the trash, sweeping up hair in the shop and whatnot. That's what he does, right? He's going to always be around grown folk in this movie, right? This little boy don't really interact with kids in this movie. Maybe one scene, But nonetheless, though, right? Samuel, Bird's smooth, suave, light-skinned ex walks in, right? And he says what's up to Ahmad, and he walks right over to Bird, say, nice, very nice. I see Terry finally gave you some money to open up your little shop. Now, if you never learned anything from rants, right, please know this. Whenever someone refer to something you're doing or you have as little, they are hating on you. Example, oh, I see you with your little Benz outside. Like, dude, you drive a Camry. But nonetheless, I know I drifted off. I know that's what I do, right? But nonetheless, though, Bird says, Terry didn't give me anything. It was an investment. And Samuel says, see, all you had to do was ask me and I would have gave it to you. And Bird says, but at what cost? And Samuel says, how much you willing to sacrifice? And Bird says, nothing. Then Samuel looks at that ham and says, you getting thick. This causes Bird to rush her client out the chair, right? And turn around and tell Samuel, look, I'm married. So whatever we had before is over. Besides, my husband's name is written all over my kitty cat. And Samuel doesn't care, right? He don't care about all that. He comes bearing gifts. He pulls out a bracelet. Tells her like, yeah, this is your wedding gift. Bird, I know you like the finer things in life. I know your man can't afford stuff like that, being that he's a felon. Whenever you need me, call me. And Bird accepts this gift. Like an idiot, right? Now we at Kenny and Maxine's house, and they just had their newborn. But what do you know? Their lovely night is interrupted by Lem, and he's invited in, even though they clearly don't want him in, right? And he pulls Kenny to the side and say, hey, it's a little personal. And Maxine walks in the room with the baby, and now Kenny and Lem, they're talking, and Lem tells Kenny, yeah, I was fired from the hospital today. I lied on my application. They asked if I ever been convicted. I checked no. See, Lem is leaving out that Veronica got his application pulled because it's all on who you know, right? And after Bird and Maxine and Terry, they made all those threats at the reception, she knew she'll get the last laugh. So, yeah, she went in, was like, yeah, he has a record. Got him fired, right? Dirty, right? So, yeah, she got the last laugh, but this makes Lem an official teenager now. He's out here having sex with no employment. He is a teenager now, right? And Lem asks Kenny, he was just hoping, if you knew, like, hopefully, do you know anybody, maybe if you got any job openings available, just let me know. And Kenny's like, don't worry, I'll find you something. And Lem smiles and says, thanks. But now, I gotta find a way to explain this to Bird. She high maintenance. She walk around the house in Chanel sandals and stuff like that. I don't want to make it seem like I'm living off her, even though I am. And Kenny says, oh no, never tell a black woman you don't have a job, because everybody know ain't nothing going on but the rent. You gotta have a J-O-B if you want to be with me. Ain't nothing going on but the rent. Yeah, y'all remember that, right? But nonetheless, though, right? Kenny peels him off a couple dollars because he realized that's the only way he's going to get Lem out of his house, right? And he tells him, like, yeah, don't tell her, you got fired and whatnot, right? Now we see Big Mama's going into surgery. And what do you know? Lem is there. This guy has no shame at all. Like, you just got fired from this hospital and you're right back showing your face, right? But it's not like he has anything to do, right? He's unemployed. You got to understand that. So he might as well support his wife and her crazy ass family and their Big Mama, right? Who cooks great soul food, right? But nonetheless, next thing we see Lem at an interview and he's dressed well. And the hiring manager gets to the question where it asks, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And Lem was honest. He selected yes. The hiring manager looks up and Lem begins to look nervous. Then the hiring manager says, we'll call you. And Lem says, look, it's a sign outside that says you're willing to train now. I got some experience and I'm a quick learner. I can do the work. Hiring manager takes his glasses off and says, look, I said we'll call you. And Lem walks out. Now we see Lem picking up Ahmad, and Ahmad is nosy. He asks, what's up, Lem? And Lem tells Ahmad, look, if I tell you something, don't tell your mother or nosy aunties. I was fired from my job last week. I was trying to find another one, but, things aren't going so well. Like, my whole thing is, why are you telling this boy this? Okay? It's almost as if Lem wants to borrow money from Ahmad. Like, why are you telling him your issues? This boy is all but, 10? He's a bandwagon Bulls fan. Come on now. Ahmad tells him, don't sweat it. You're going to find another gig soon. Being very mature, right? And Lem says, you got a lot of confidence to be a shorty. Then he tests Ahmad, right? He asks him to open up the glove department, and Ahmad sees the tool, right, and panics. This causes Lem to close the glove department and tells Ahmad, a kid, right? Yeah, I was in prison. I made some mistakes. Like, dude, he don't know you. Ahmad don't know you. You're not his father. He just met you, But anyway, now Bird and her employees, they taking a lunch break at her house, right? And Bird, you got the Rican lady, then you got the flamboyant brother with the red hair, of course, right? And they catch Lem getting out the shower. And Bird pushes him in the bathroom and asks, what you doing home? And Lem comes clean. He's like, yeah, I was fired from my job because I lied on my application, And he's like, I wanted to tell you, but Kenny told me not to. Like, this dude just throws Kenny right under the bus, right? Then he goes on a rant and blames the system as to why he can't find a job. And Bird says, that white stuff is old and sick. I'm tired of ninjas using it as an excuse. Like, she tired of people using the white man, right? And Lem says, I've been on 6 interviews. What you know about being a black man anyway? And Bird says, you right, I don't know anything about being a black man. Then she apologizes and says, look, the shop is doing well. I'll pay all the bills. It's a lot of people that come through there. I'll see if I can, get someone to maybe hook you up with a job. And Lem says, Bird, I don't need your help. I can find my own damn job. He got all this pride and ego, right? Like he don't got stomach issues, right? You guys got to remember, he got them stomach issues too. He's drinking in this movie, but he still got them crazy stomach issues. Now we back at the shop and Samuel walks in. He's like, yeah, I knew you would call me. All suave and whatnot, right? And Bird, she's trying to be nice, buttering him up. She's like, Samuel, let me take your bag, sweetie. Walk with me. Have a seat. Why don't you let me hook your fade up? And Samuel sits down and asks, what's this all about? And Bird says, actually, I need a favor. And she whispers in Samuel's ear, right? And I guess he agrees to whatever she says. Now we see Lem walking in, right? And he says, Bird, where you at? Where you at? I got some great news. And Bird has a romantic dinner arranged, right, with champagne. And she's dressed like she's ready for freaky time. And Lem says, I got a job. And Bird claps. And Lem says, yeah, Kenny called me yesterday and told me to ask about a job at the biggest printing company in town. So I went down there, and they didn't even know who Kenny Simmons was. So, I had to kick some game, See, I told them, I was the man, I was the best man for the job. So finally he looks at me and says, you're hired, right there on the spot. And Bird's like, yeah, that's right, baby. You the man, you my man, right? And now we see like what should be a great day for Lem becomes one of the worst days of his life. Next to getting beat up in the projects by Andre, of course, right? Because that was a terrible day too. But Lem is having an excellent day, right? He's at work. Everything is going extremely well. He's getting complimented and everything, right? But then lunchtime comes around, and Lem is trying to eat his sandwich, and the sandwich looks pretty good, but we got to remember this movie is called soul food, not Jewish deli food, right? And Samuel walks in, and he walks over and introduces himself. He's like, hey, I'm Samuel St. James, chief executive, sales and marketing. I've been hearing a lot of great things about you, especially the way you've been handling the machines down there. And Lem says, yeah, I'm no stranger to hard work, And Samuel offers him a cigar and sits down and tells him, yeah, it's always good to have hardworking employees around, especially down there in printing. I'm no stranger to hard work myself. I'm from the hood just like you. But see, I make $80K a year because I was always willing to sacrifice whatever I had to get what I wanted. Now, granted, $80K in 97 is equal to $166K in today's money, okay? And granted, the camera scenes during this dialogue is shot so close to his mouth, like it makes you feel uncomfortable. Then Samuel says, see, that's why brothers gotta stick together. Pull another up in a time of need. The white man not gonna do it. And sooner or later, it's gonna be your time to help another brother out. Just like I helped you. And Lem looks at him like, what you talking about? And Samuel says, oh, you didn't know? I pulled some strings to get you hired. And Lem says, nah, Kenny Simmons referred me. And Samuel says, who? And naturally now, Lem is confused. But don't worry. See, Samuel came down to this lunch table to play Mr. Big Nuts. He tells him, nah, I know your wife, Bird. Yeah, she told me about your little felony situation and asked me to hook you up with a gig in the printing department. Yeah, Lem Harris. Or should I call you Ronald? Yeah, me and Cola go way back. And then Lem says, who's Ronald? And who's Cola? And Samuel says, oh, I think you know who Ronald is. See, I love to bowl. And when you bowl, you knock down pins. And if you're good enough, you can knock down all 10 pins at one time and get a strike. Oh, and since we on the topic of knocking down, well, Cola, that's just something I used to call her back in the day, 'cause she got that body shaped like a Coca-Cola bottle. I mean, she used to just make a brother want to scream. And Lem proceeds to hit Samuel in the face, prison style, with the lunch tray, and kicks him 4 times. 4 times, right? And Samuel gets up and tries to save face, talking about, you can forget your job, mother sucker. And Lem walks out, right? And then this leads to Lem walking in Bird's hair salon and slamming that door so hard that the glass breaks. One of the most classic scenes in this movie, right? Next to Big Mama making chillings, right? Next to that, right? He walks over to Bird and drags her right into the back room and yells at her, you think I'm not man enough to find my own job? You messing around with that dude? Ain't no man gonna give you nothing for free. Not out here. And Bird says, I didn't do anything with him. I just told him I would go to dinner with him. That's it, I'm sorry. And then Lem looks at Bird's wrist and says, what's this? What's this? And she responds, it's nothing, it's just a bracelet. It don't mean nothing. And tries to give him a hug, right? And Lem says, don't touch me. And Bird says, I love you. I did this for us. And now Lem is irate. See, he's a grown-ass man that can't control his emotions. And that's dangerous, right? He shoves her to the wall and tells her, stay away from me. And she screams. Now, if you're not in this room, you're naturally going to think Bird was beat on. And that's exactly what Terry thought. As mentioned before, Terry never trusted this thug, okay? She's on the phone calling cousin Blimp to push up on Lem. This is a pivotal point in this movie now because you got a whole lawyer staging a beatdown, right? But she knew what she was doing because if you remember, she tells Blimp and the boys, don't bring no tools. You remember that? And now we at the bar. And Lem, he's taking shots of whiskey straight and smoking cigarettes on that bad ulcer. And a big ass guy and his crew from Robert Taylor Homes come in. And Lem doesn't know, but that's cousin Blimp. Yeah, that's cousin Blimp. Blimp walk over to the bar. He says, hey, give me and my boys a couple brews. My little bald man with the bad stomach lining, he's paying for it. And Lem starts laughing. He's like, I ain't paying for y'all. But Blimp cracked him over the head with that beer bottle, right? And Lem recovers fairly quickly, right? He drops one homeboy from Robert Taylor Homes, then he drops the next one, okay? All one hitter quitters, right? And Blimp listened to his cousin Terry. He didn't bring any tools, right? But no, see, Lem, Ronald, Strike, he never lacks. He never know when he may run into Rodney Little again, right? Man, Lem pulled that tool on Blimp, and Blimp is lucky he didn't get deleted. You know, he's really lucky. But of course, this leads to the police coming and Lem going back to jail. And Ahmad witnessed all of this, of course. You know, and Blimp was arrested as well. And Lem makes a classic face as he's getting in the car. It's so legendary, right? So late 90s. Like, yeah, I'm tough. I'm tough. Look at me. I'm getting arrested. I'm Lem. I'm Ronald Strike Dunham. I'm tough. Now we see Bird talking to Maxine, and this is much later in the movie after Big Mama passed. But she tells Maxine, Lem is going to be a daddy. And Maxine is excited, of course, and Bird says she missed Lem. And Maxine tells Bird, you can't have your ex get your husband a job. And of course, a 10-year-old, Ahmad, is able to tell us, the audience, right, that Terry felt bad about almost having Lem delete their cousin Blimp. And, you know, she made a couple calls, had a couple favors done, being that, you know, Lem is about to be a father, right? And now it's the final Sunday dinner of the movie after Big Mama passed, and Ahmad planned this whole thing, you know, and Lem pops in. And Ahmad sees him and asks him, hey, when did you get out of jail? Like, this boy won't ever stay in a child's place. You know, when Lem pulls Ahmad to the side because he's fresh out of the clink and he needs to confide to a 10-year-old bandwagon Bulls fan, right? And Ahmad tells him, you know, we having Sunday dinner, and Lem, he don't even care to ask about Big Mama, you know. He immediately tells this little boy, yeah, I messed up, huh? You know, like, this little boy isn't your father, Lem. You know, then he asks Ahmad how his wife is doing. And Ahmad says, she's in there. Why don't you go ask her? Like, it's sad a kid has to tell you this. It's sad, you know. Then he tells Ahmad, yeah, you know I let you down, but I didn't beat on your auntie. I just pushed her. And I was still wrong, but I would never put my hands on her. Like, dude, you fresh out of jail and you confessing to a kid, and Ahmad doesn't care, right? And Bird walks in and sees Lem, and Ahmad grown ass gonna say, I'll leave you two alone. You know, timing all perfect. Like, you, come on, bro. You 10 years old, bro. And they reunite and hug and kiss, and Lem is telling Bird, I'm sorry, I messed up, you know. And Bird says, I have something to tell you. And now we at the table, right? We're eating, right? You know, we're going to assume Lem knows that Big Mama passed away, I guess, because Lord knows nobody tells him this information, right? Nobody explains that to him. You know, he was arrested doing all this, right? And everybody is eating, you know, the traditional slave dishes, right? And Lem says, hey, everybody, I got my job back. Yeah, they asked the brother to come back to work because they know I'm a good, strong, skilled worker. And Kenny asks, hey, so how you get out of jail? And Lem says, to tell you the truth, I don't even know. Someone talked to somebody, and next thing you know, charges was dropped, And Terry boldly lets him know, well, actually, I called a friend of mine at the defense attorney's office for a favor. I felt bad. Terry just wants some damn validation, And Lem looks at her and says, well, you should feel bad. Because of you, I had to spend weeks in jail. And Terry said, you should be thankful. Now you can spend time and take care of your pregnant wife. And that's how the news is broken to Lem, right? And Berg doesn't hold back. She says, you know what, Terry? You need to mind your own damn business. Nobody asked you for your help. You need to be worried about your husband sleeping with your little cousin. And of course, this leads to grown-ass Ahmad almost burning the house down, right? And Terry saves the day once again with that, right? Only to get no credit. And Kenny sprays the old senile uncle with the fire extinguisher, and the TV falls, and they find the money. And Ahmad lame ass tells us that Bird and Lem got their own spot, right? And they're expecting the baby any day now. And to be honest, we're gonna really be honest though. What do you think they named their daughter? Yep, well, you see Bird, you see Ronald strike Dunham, aka Lem Harris, and you see their daughter, Big Momula. Yeah, yep, Big Momula. Yep, that's her name, Big Momula. Randumb Rants. Like and subscribe.